So welcome to this interview, this chat, I don't really know what to call it. My name's Suzy and I'm the Operations Manager for the Outreach team in West Yorkshire for Great Minds Together. And today I have Gaunt joining me, who was one of our parents who we supported in the past. And she's gone on to write this amazing book, which we're going to be discussing a bit further on into this interview. So obviously at Great Minds Together we run a Behaviour Awareness week, and that's starting on the 23rd of September this year. And the purpose of that Behaviour Awareness week, as you can imagine, is to raise awareness about how behaviours are managed in children and young people who have special educational needs, social, emotional, mental health difficulties. And I suppose the push from our side at Great Minds Together is that we don't think sanctions work.
No.
Which I can see you already agree with me on that, Jo. So we were sort of looking at how more therapeutic approaches to behaviour in schools would work, what that would look like, and how we can all support schools to implement them better, really. So I don't know if you want to give a bit of an introduction of who you are, where you've come from, where your journey's come from.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
So I'm Jo, as Suzy said. I am a neurodivergent person myself. I'm attention hyperactive, little fidget toys to keep me calm as we go. I'm part of a family of neurodivergent people, so everybody within my household is identified and confirmed as being neurodivergent. We have a mix of diagnosis of pathological demand avoidance, attention hyperactive, autistic, sensory processing, dyslexia. Everything's mixed up within there. So meeting everybody's needs in the home is a challenge in itself.
Of course, yeah.
On top of that, I have a professional background of 20 years plus working within education settings. So I've worked in mainstream primary schools, I've assisted high schools, I've worked in specialist nurseries, and in every setting that I've worked in, I've always worked with neurodivergent children.
Yeah, okay. And have you found that neurodivergent children struggle in some aspects of those settings that you've worked in? And if so, in what way? How has it kind of been identified that they've been struggling, I suppose?
I think it depends on the setting. If the setting is on board with neuroaffirming approaches, the children won't appear to struggle as much because of how they're being supported. But in the settings that I've been in, where behaviour sanctions are the kind of go-to approach, where it is about either having traffic light systems on the wall, where it is about having a rewards and a consequence kind of system, or moving on into the high schools where it becomes about having detentions and isolation. In those settings, we find that the neurodivergent children struggle more, and that comes across in the behaviours that are presented. But actually, if we break down those behaviours, it's not a child being willfully defiant. It is a child that is struggling to be themselves within an environment that isn't created for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in my mind, I always go into when I've been supporting families in the past, and you know, if there are particular behaviours that are challenging within the school are finding difficult to manage, I think I kind of look upon it through the lens of being a behaviour detective, so to speak, because obviously children and young people can't always tell us what's going on, can they? They just have this behaviour that's happening, and they don't often understand it themselves, you know. So it's definitely up to us as adults to just try and work out what that is.
And it's identifying that why. Because there's always a why behind these behaviours, and it's understanding that the behaviours that are presented outwardly are just that. They are a presentation of what that child is going through inside. But we need to be looking at that why. We need to be looking at why that child is presenting that behaviour to us, not just trying to stop the behaviour and get the child to conform.
Yeah, I think there's a good saying that, you know, you can't sanction behaviours out of children. I don't think it works. And I've seen in schools where I've worked, I've seen with families I've supported myself, families across the team we've supported, where the schools just keep implementing sanction after sanction after sanction after sanction, and then they look back and they go, but nothing's changing, or let's put a higher sanction in, and then it's a higher sanction and a higher sanction till it possibly becomes an exclusion, which is absolutely not what we want. And I just think if you keep doing what you've always done, you're always going to get what you've always got, and you know, that kind of saying. And I think there definitely needs to be a change in that approach. What do you think, Jo? Do you think that's something?
I think there definitely needs to be something, and I think it needs to be very quickly. Yeah. Because I mean, at the moment, some of these stories that I've had just over the last couple of weeks, when you know children have transitioned from primary school to high school, and some of the stories that I've heard recently about these children being put into these sanctions, children getting restoration. One example I can come up, and this comes from personal experience. Child in the classroom, in science classroom, and they're wearing goggles to do a science experiment.
Okay.
When her group had finished, she took the goggles off.
Okay.
She got to the point with this teacher of being threatened that they were going to call the team to come and put her in restoration.
Right.
For taking the goggles off.
Okay.
But when you speak to this child, the goggles have been causing a sensory issue.
Right.
The child had kept the goggles on while they were doing the experiment because she knew they would keep her safe.
Okay.
She'd taken them off at the first opportunity she felt safe to do so when her group had finished.
Right.
But didn't get given that autonomy to explain.
Yeah.
And you go back and you look on the situations and you think, 2 minutes of asking the child why. Being that detective, asking them what happened in that situation. Explaining your why. Well, actually, other groups are still doing this. I need the goggles on.
Yeah.
Can you put the goggles on, or can you go wait over there in the corner where it's safe?
Yeah.
But no, this incident escalated straight away to where this child was nearly taken to restoration for the rest of the day.
Wow.
For willful defiance.
Mm.
And this isn't willful defiance.
No.
When we unpick all of these situations, children are trying to use their autonomy. They are trying to explain what they need, but they lack the communication skills. They lack the social skills. And this isn't just neurodivergent children.
No.
They are children.
Mm.
As adults, we can't always explain. You go home after a bad day and you're banging around in the kitchen. Your partner doesn't know why. No. You haven't explained to them why. You're not being defiant. You're not trying to make their day even harder.
No.
And this is the thing that gets forgotten about children. Children will do well when they can.
Mm-hmm.
They can when they are regulated, when they can respond, when they can function, and when they can process because they are regulated. They will do well.
Yeah.
So if we have a child who isn't doing well, we need to be moving away from these behaviour sanctions and looking into actually why are they not doing well? Yeah. Are they overwhelmed? Are they in crisis? And becoming that behaviour detective to find out that why.
Definitely. I think I totally agree with you. And I don't think there is enough conversations go on with the young people to understand them better. And I think at the foundation of all that is the relationships. Yeah. You know, that trusted, safe relationship that children need with the adults that they're working with. And that's really key, isn't it? Because without that, how are they going to trust in an adult to help them? Yeah. You know, so I think that's a really important factor.
This group of children that you spoke about at the beginning where like we put a sanction, then we put another sanction on top. There is a team that comes and issues those sanctions. Mm. There is a team that comes and puts those children into detention, into isolation, into restoration, whatever they want to call it, and rings the parents and tells them that they've been misbehaving all day. Why are we not using those members of staff to build those key relationships? Yeah. Why are we not using those members of staff to use neuroaffirming approaches to look at the why, to build that relationship and to help these children to thrive?
Yeah, absolutely. And they can thrive. I mean, there's absolutely no reason why they couldn't thrive, but sometimes the environments are just not set up to help them to thrive in their best way, are they, I suppose? Can you think of some things that a child's behaviour might be trying to tell us, Jo? I know there could be a wide range of things, but just to explain to people who are watching, what types of things do you think might be behind some behaviours? Just give some examples.
I think quite often the first thing that we need to be looking at is the nervous system state. Like the nervous system is our operating system for our bodies. It controls everything that our bodies do. And if we're regulated, if we are in that state of where we can process and function, then we will. I've never met a child yet who doesn't want to do well.
No.
So if that child isn't, one of the first things that we need to be looking at is, okay, the why. Why not? What is going on with this child's nervous system state?
Yeah.
Are they overwhelmed?
Yeah.
Are they in crisis point? And, the behaviours that we'll see quite often, it could be shouting out, it could be throwing things across the classroom, it's trying to distract the friend at the side of them. Why is the child doing this?
Yeah.
And I've unpicked so many scenarios in schools. The child who, the minute they get to an English lesson, he's always playing up.
Yeah.
He's always distracting his friends. He never sits still on the carpet. Okay, let's take him out. Let's spend some time with this child. Let's unpick what's going on.
And I've heard that with some children as well, where it's in a particular subject, yet in maths, they're a different child. They're great. So is that an issue that they're struggling with the learning?
Quite often,
straight off, and not understanding what the English lesson's about, possibly. So,
or they've had a really experience in the past that has made their self-esteem be so low that they are then worrying and anticipating that the same is going to happen in these lessons.
Fail, possibly. Yeah.
And it really is that bigger picture of everything. It's not a child who is just misbehaving on that day, and that child is not trying to give the teacher a hard time.
No.
They are having a hard time. And it is our job as the adults to use our emotions, to use our ability to be able to emotionally regulate, to co-regulate with that child, and to help them return to a state of where they can function.
Yeah. And then you mentioned it before, it's about that autonomy that children and young people can hold in learning how to regulate themselves. What works for them? Do they need to take themselves out for 5 minutes? Do they need to have a fiddle toy like you've brought along today? What is it that they need to help that self-regulation that they can do without the aid of anybody? Because there are lots of things you can have in place.
There's so much that can be done, and can be really easily done within school settings as well, to be able to assist these children to be able to regulate themselves. I know so many adults that struggle with this. I've helped when I'm working with families, and so I'm sure you do yourself. You teach the adult as much as what you're teaching the child.
Absolutely, yeah.
And, is it a school-wide problem that actually we need to be giving emotional regulation support to the staff that are there to then be able to enable these staff to feel the benefits of having fidget toys, of feeling the benefits of allowing a child to stand at the side of their desk rather than being made to sit in the chair.
Yeah.
Simple changes that can be made within a classroom setting can have such a positive effect on not just one particular child in the classroom, but on all of the children within the classroom.
Definitely. I think another aspect of when we talk about behaviours is we often focus on those explosive behaviours, don't we? But we don't often see or focus as much on those quieter, withdrawn behaviours, but they are still behaviours, and I think those can be telling us something too. And quite often, I think quiet, withdrawn children get overlooked a little bit because they're not causing a big ruckus in the classroom.
Yeah.
They're just sitting quietly. Teachers' dreams sometimes, but I think it's important to pick up on those. What are your thoughts on that?
Most definitely. I mean, I talk about in the book the crisis state of our nervous system, and that when we're in that crisis state, our body is in a panic state. It is often frozen and shut down to the point of where we can't function, we can't process, we can't respond. You can shout at a child when they are in this state as much as you want. They are not in control of their actions and what they do.
No.
And this can present as those explosive behaviours that you talk about, the child who gets up and throws the chair as they're walking out the classroom, or pushes another peer as they go past. But it can also be the child who just shuts down and hides their head down. And when you're asking them to look at the board, and when you're asking them to do stuff and they're not responding back to you, that is your indication, that is your red flag that actually this child is in a crisis state.
Yeah.
And they so often get missed because they're not having those massive explosive behaviours, which are seen as, this is the issue, remove that child.
Yeah.
This child that is sat there is still in that same panic state, still cannot work and function how they need to, and needs that support and that co-regulation to be able to return to a regulated state the same.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've seen so many children who, because of the way that we handle those explosive behaviours, and they get told that that is wrong, and it is, they see these children getting sanctioned for it, they mask those behaviours and they internalise all of those feelings, and then they get missed.
Yeah.
So they're not getting any support, whereas the child who explodes then goes out and gets some kind of support, whether it's that they leave that environment that is overwhelming for them by going to restoration.
Yeah.
The child that is sat there quietly, that is masking, we're not doing anything to protect their emotional and psychological well-being by allowing them to sit there and almost ignoring these children.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the really key point of this, because I think it's not something that comes to mind always, is it? Those withdrawn, quiet behaviours, and I think it's really important to recognise that that is in itself an indication that something's not right. What would be, if you could wave a magic wand, I suppose, what would you think could be done differently in schools, would work better? How would you sort of see that perfect school, the change? What would it look like?
I think the change would come from the top upwards. And I see so many staff in their classroom who want to make the change, that are quite often held by the teams above them.
Yeah.
You know, we need to be getting to the top of this and filtering it down. Senior leadership teams need to be accepting responsibility that actually the approaches that they're using, there is no difference to the sanctions of putting a child in isolation, socially taking them away from everybody, moving them and reprimanding them and creating that kind of shame for a child's behaviour as what there was many, many years ago when we rapped children on the knuckles for writing left-handed.
Yeah.
We are still causing the same emotional and psychological distress to these children as what happened years ago. And until that changes from the top upwards, until we start using neuroaffirming approaches that help these children to co-regulate, that help these children to understand that I can be myself, I can say when I need to go to the bathroom, I can say that I need to fidget with something, or I need to stand up. Until we make that change from the top upwards, I don't see there being the change in the classroom.
I do think it has to come, like you say, from those leadership teams in schools. You know, I'm aware that by law they all have to have some form of behaviour policy in place, and that's fine. I get that. I understand that. Obviously, we want people to be safe in schools, and I completely understand that. But I know that there's some schools are making the shift, and there's not many, to more of they call it a relational policy. I don't know if you've heard of those, Jo, but that very much focuses on building those positive relationships with children. And you know,
the behaviour policy, yes, we've got to have that policy, but we don't have to have a policy that is about having these sanctions that build and build and build and build. You know, the bottom of that policy needs to be that if a child is showing behaviours that are affecting the rest of the class, they are showing behaviours that is not within the kind of normal expected for that child when they are regulated, your first step of that behaviour policy is that child gets adults' attention. That child goes and spends time with somebody. That child has their experiences validated. Yes, you'll have your further steps up, but actually if we're making those little steps at the bottom, we're not going to get to those bigger steps.
And I think that makes sense from everybody's perspective. You know, if we're, you know, the child enters secondary in year 7, let's say, we start to see these behaviours happening. Someone's in there, gets to understand them, puts what the child needs in place. The rest of the school life is going to be, not saying without, you know, bumps, but hopefully a lot smoother, because we've recognised things immediately and got something in place. And that makes sense for everybody involved. It's less stress for teachers. There's less need to, you know, have staff to man your isolation rooms and all the rest of it. There's less angry parents around. We're being called every day. The children hopefully have that more trusted relationship with the adults. So, and it's a small change.
It's a no-brainer, but
it does feel like a no-brainer. You're right,
and it's a small change that has such a big impact. And when you can get these little changes made, and people start to see, it's like a domino effect. You know, you work on 1 or 2 little changes at a time, and then people go, oh, this works. Actually, right, let's do the next thing and do the next thing. And that's how you create the bigger change. But without that buy-in from all of the staff, without that knowledge being, you know, kind of disseminated between all of the staff within the school, and everybody feeling that, yes, we need this change, we're going to struggle to have that impact that we need to.
and we can just hope that by running our Behaviour Awareness Week and speaking to people like you, and obviously your book, which we'll come on to in a minute now, getting out there, that it just helps schools and anybody else working with children and young people to understand them better, and know that a lot of behaviour probably does arise from unmet needs, which I think is quite often the case.
That's the bottom line, isn't it, really? Behaviour is an indication that that child's needs, that person's needs, are not being met in that environment.
Yeah, exactly. Which I think brings us really nicely on to your book. And I must admit, I've not read it yet, Jo. But I did go on to a lovely book signing, and it was wonderful.
It was a lovely evening.
I have my own signed copy for when she's very famous. So like this is the book that Jo's written. I have touched on a couple of parts of your sort of acronyms that you use, the WISE Thrive, which I'm sure you'll talk about in a moment. And I think that's a really, really good way to explain to schools even. I know you've wrote this particularly for parents to use at home, but I think there's room definitely for that approach to be, shared with schools as well. So, but anyway, I'm going to let you talk about your book, have a little chat about that.
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of interest actually from education professionals, not so much schools at the moment, but educational professionals, about the Be Wise and Thrive approach. Lots of people that have bought the book with the intention of kind of reading it to see what they can do to help themselves at home, and then they've read about the Be Wise and Thrive, and they're like, actually, we can use this within the school.
I absolutely think it's transferable.
The book's been written because there isn't that much help for parents at home.
Yeah.
And what you do here, Great Minds Together, is fabulous. But for a lot of us as parents, and this is the position that I was in going back 8-10 years ago, it's a very lonely place. You're identifying that your child maybe thinks different to the rest of the society that you're within. You're trying to talk to family members who don't understand. You're talking to friends whose children manage to go to the park.
Yeah.
And you're feeling very isolated. And the book is the book that I needed 10, 20 years ago, right, to be able to say to me, yes, you do things differently, and that is okay.
Yeah.
And, 8 years ago to be able to say, yes, your children do things differently, that is okay.
Yeah.
It isn't a follow everything in this book.
No,
because that doesn't work. We all work in different ways. We all need to do things differently for our family.
Yeah.
But the way I've tried to write the book is that as you read the book, you will pick up the bits that will help your family. And by implementing them, you will have a positive impact on your family.
Yeah.
First part of the book very much focuses on you as a parent.
Okay.
And it talks about letting go of that perfect. Letting go of those societal expectations, everything that we are expected your child should be able to do, you should be able to do as a parent. We need to let go of them. Yeah. We do things differently.
And we do all in the playgrounds, don't we? In primary school, there'll be parents who probably not meaning to, but judging you, well, what, didn't you do this to them, or why did you buy them that? That's spoiling them. And
you just need to go to bed earlier.
Yeah, and then why don't you just put them to bed earlier and all that, and we do hear that a lot as parents, don't we? Like I say, it's probably not coming from a bad place in particular, but when you have children who are very different, then, it does make you feel like you're doing something wrong.
So many times, and you're stood there thinking, I know it's coming from a well-meaning place.
Yeah.
You're telling me what I've done 10 times already, and it hasn't made a difference.
No.
The book gives you the empowerment to go, actually, what I am doing for my child is the right thing, because it helps my child sleep better than he's ever done. It helps my child to eat more than he's ever been able to eat.
Yeah.
The second part of the book talks about the cornerstones that we can put in within our home.
Okay.
And the cornerstones are the structure, routines, visuals, and transitions.
Okay.
Structure, everybody has. And your structure is quite often confused with routines.
Okay.
And I've heard lots of professionals, and I've had it said to myself, and I've heard it said to other parents, you just need more routine in your life. And this parent's thinking, but I've tried routines and they don't seem to work.
Right.
And what the professional's often talking about is the whole day. And they're implying that the whole day needs to be as a routine. That's not what routines are. That's your structure.
Okay.
The time that you get up in the morning, the time that you go to bed on night time, how many meals you have in a day, what time you eat your meals, all of that is your structure of the day.
Okay.
Routines are the small sequence of events that build that structure.
Right.
So if you, like my family eats 3 meals a day. We have 3 mealtime routines for for how we do those.
Okay.
Within those routines, we have mini routines. So if you think of brushing your teeth, your routines that you go into the bathroom, you brush your teeth at the same time as you get a wash, you go to the bathroom, you leave once you've washed your hands. There's another routine within that of brushing your teeth.
Yeah.
Of what order you put the toothpaste on, what order you put the water on your brush, or how long you brush your teeth for. And for children that are neurodivergent, those routines and those sequence of events that build those routines up, they are so important. And that's where a lot of the adjustments can be made within the home, that simple adjustments that create such a positive impact. Because once parents understand the difference between structure and routines, and I have lots of people come to me and they'll be like, but I don't use routines. I'm attention hyperactive. I use routines.
Yeah.
And when I talk to everybody, I unpick, and they do use routines.
Yeah.
One of my children, the routine never changes. The sequence of events within that routine never changes. For me, my routine, I get up and I go in the bathroom first. What I do when I'm in the bathroom, that sequence of events, that's where my attention hyperactive comes in.
Okay.
Because the routine and the sequence will change each day. I'll still do the same 5 things, but in a different order.
Okay.
So everybody uses routine and structure. Using visuals, it's not just about the little PEX cards that are often kind of promoted as the child needs visuals. There is a time and a place for them. Not saying that they're not useful. However, using visuals, as I explain it in the book, is about using everyday objects around us as a language to communicate with.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'll quite often implement as one of those small changes so that parents can see the impact first of all, breakfast time.
Right.
The child's still tired, you've got them up in the morning, you've brought them down into the kitchen, parents going, but he doesn't want anything. But you're verbally saying to them, do you want toast? Do you want a brochet roll? Do you want cereal? What cereal do you want? Lots of verbal commands coming. Get the breakfast out.
Yeah.
Put the toast, put the brochet rolls, put the breakfast cereal boxes on the table. One verbal question. What would you like?
Yeah.
And because they can visually see that, and you've reduced all of the sensory input, you've reduced the amount of demands that are being placed onto them, the amount of processing that they have to do, the child can look, the child will decide what they want.
Yeah.
And it's by making those little changes that we can have a big impact and create this safe space. The transitions quite often are not given the respect that they need.
Okay.
Every time we do anything, when I got out of my car and came into the building, that was a transition from one place to another into the building. Quite often with children, we will rush those transitions. Expect them within 2 minutes, get your shoes and coat on, we need to be out the door for school. Neurodivergent children need more empathy and understanding put in towards the transitions. Yeah. Those transitions need a lot longer time. It could be half an hour.
Preparation for them, I guess, as well is key, isn't it? So that they're aware they're coming up, which would be part of your structure and routine, I guess. Yeah, wouldn't it? So and that's so they know that whatever they do before, that means we're then going to leave the house after I've done this task.
And using your visuals to instigate that the transition's about to start. So it all ties in really nicely together with each other. Yeah. And then the third part of the book is about the Be Wise and Thrive approach. Okay. Now, the Be Wise and Thrive approach is 2 acronyms that are really easy to remember. The WISE gives you the what, helps you to identify the why. It is a roadmap for those life-challenging moments. Okay. So when we were talking about the education, we were talking about, the child we can see them getting overwhelmed, we can see them being dysregulated, those kind of moments. In the home, that could be that you've asked your child to come off technology, and all of a sudden, it's big chaos. It could be that you're trying to get them ready for bed and you're trying to work your way through that routine. This routine that's worked for a week now isn't working. The child's not doing what they usually do. Yeah. That's where we use WISE. Okay. WISE is looking at the when, the individual, the sequence of events, and the environment. Okay. And work your way through the WISE, you will find out the why. And once we know that why, we can then support the child through that. Yeah. So it might be that the child, they've done this routine all the time. They've done it for a week. It's been working fabulous to get them sorted and ready for bed. Not working. Yeah. It's not happening that night. Let's look at the whys. Yeah. When? We were 10 minutes later. Right. And routines are time bound. So the being 10 minutes later might have a little impact because the adult would be rushing.
Yeah.
But actually, if you follow that sequence of events, the child doesn't know any different.
No.
Because the sequence is still the same.
Yeah.
Might be the individual. It might be that they're not feeling up to it today. We have fluctuating capacities. We can do more on one day than what we can on another. We know this as adults.
Yes.
You know, how many days do you get up and you have a really productive morning, and then other days you're just like, I really can't today.
Get anything done.
We don't give the same gratitude to the children that they have those fluctuating capacities.
And I've heard that from school staff in the past, and you probably have. Well, I did exactly the same yesterday and it worked then, and I don't understand why it's not working today. You know, and I've heard that so many times.
Because they can't today.
No.
And it's not that they don't want to, and it's not this willful defiance that they're choosing not to.
No. It's
that actually they can't. Their nervous system cannot, on that day, function, process, and respond as they did yesterday.
And there's a reason behind why.
Yep. And that's where the whys comes in, because you will identify the reason why. Once we've identified that reason why, we can then move on to supporting the child.
Yeah.
And the thrive is what helps you to support the child.
Okay.
Now, we can thrive with the children when they are regulated, and doing so when they're regulated builds the connection and the trust and the feeling of security that the children need. That means when you then thrive when they are overwhelmed and in crisis, you do not spend as long in those times.
Yeah.
Because the child has that overwhelming feeling of security. Mm. That child has that feeling that you know what you're doing to support them. They know that you are going to help them thrive. You are going to give them the same support when they're overwhelmed and when they're in crisis as what you give them when they're regulated.
Yeah.
Thrive stands for giving time.
Okay.
Not so much in, I'm going to give you 5 minutes and then we need to be back into class. Genuinely giving them the time that they need.
Okay.
And this can be getting ready to go out. It can be, you know, if you're at home, your child needs 15 minutes, plan that into your routine. Give them the time that they need to be able to process and respond to things. Yeah. Give them your time. They are going to take your time, be it through those behaviours that we've talked about, or be it in a regulated state, because you're giving them that time. Honouring needs, and this goes back to having that autonomy, being able to say what they need, and that being validated. You know, how many times do children have to put their hand up and ask to go to the bathroom? This is an innate need that we all have. Yeah. And, you know, so many times you hear about, well, we're preparing them for adult life. I'm sorry, I don't know any workplace where they can't go off to the bathroom when they need to.
No.
Yet we expect children to follow the same.
I know.
And it can be the need to fidget. It can be their need to stand up at the table and work. It can be their need to actually have their 3 pens lined up in front of them, because visually that is calming to them. No harm in letting the child do that.
No.
Honour those needs.
And again, they're often really small things.
Yeah.
You know.
And they take no time at all. And actually, they'll probably use less time allowing the child to honour their needs than they would in you trying to stop them having that need met. Restoring the balance. This is a big one that quite often, working with professionals in like schools and nurseries, is one that we really need to focus on first of all. And what tends to happen at the moment is you'll have a child who's overwhelmed or in crisis. They will come down to a state of where they can respond and function a little bit more, right back into class. And then 10 minutes later, that child's out again.
Yeah.
And they're in crisis and they're overwhelmed because something that normally wouldn't has triggered them. That's because their balance wasn't restored. Until you can have that child responding, functioning and processing and working through an activity with yourself, sitting and having a chat with yourself, being able to explain kind of what went on and do the restorative work with them, that child's balance isn't restored.
No.
And in the home, I talk about restoring the balance is quite often, once you've had that kind of overwhelming meltdown in crisis, why do we then expect the child to be able to go back out into that family home? You know, until their balance is restored, going out and being with the other family members can be too triggering, can be overwhelming. One thing I advocate for is spend the evening in the bedroom.
Yeah.
You know, give them, if that is their safe space, let them be in their safe space.
That's what they need, yeah.
Let them have the tea in there. Let them be in there with you that evening. Spend that time with them. Honour their needs to be in there. Restore the balance.
Yeah.
When the child feels restored, they will make that choice to rejoin. And in schools and in nurseries, this is something that we really need to work on more, because once that balance is restored, you will find, and I'm sure that if we tracked all of this on the data that they require, you'd see that the children that have their balance restored are less likely to come out again on that same instance.
I think if you think of it as like a bucket almost,
Yep.
you know, and we always say, don't we, it's spilled over, or and that's what's happened, I guess, when the child's maybe had to leave the classroom, and then slowly you're emptying the bucket. But if you're only emptying a tiny portion of it,
it doesn't take very many pebbles to fill it back up again.
Exactly.
When you're straight back into the classroom.
That's exactly how I see that restoring of the balance.
Restoring the balance is emptying that bucket down to a point of where they are going back in with a fresh bucket.
Yeah.
The next thing that comes is about being innovative.
Okay.
And this is on the adults. This is on the person who is co-regulating with that child. You need to have a toolbox. What you do one day does not work the next day.
No.
And you need to be able to pick different things out of randomly, and just, you know, it could be trying to get a child to walk down a corridor in school. And you know that physically they can. But at the moment they can't. They are overwhelmed and in crisis. Be innovative.
Yeah.
Can you go into the empty classroom? Is it a child that you can have a bit of a joke with? It's an empty corridor. Can you see whether you can walk down backwards to get in there? Really about finding those different quirky kind of connections that you can have with that child. And sometimes it takes us out of our box.
Yeah.
You know, we have to step outside of what we usually do and completely grasp at straws, but something will work. But without us being innovative, with us always trying the same things every time, we're never going to make the next steps that we need to.
And again, this is where it worked yesterday. Well, humour might work one day, but might not work another. But it's the same with us as adults.
Yeah.
Humour might work with you one day, but maybe you're not in the mood for it another day, you know. So it's
and that all comes back down to the nervous system side. Where I was at yesterday is not where I'm at today. So what I found funny yesterday, I don't find funny today.
No.
The next step of Thrive is to validate the experiences.
Yeah.
And this is a huge thing that quite often with children, it isn't done. And I think the impact isn't assessed of how much damage that can cause as well. You know, how many times do you hear people say, I'm cold? Oh, you're not cold. It's not cold in here, it's warm.
Yeah.
No, that's your experience that's warm in here.
Yeah.
That child's experience is that they are cold.
Mm.
You know, a child could come in and be like, oh, it's been really loud out in the playground. No, it wasn't that loud. It was louder yesterday when Jimmy was running around screaming. Yes, but yesterday, my nervous system could cope with that.
Yeah.
Today, my nervous system can't, because maybe I've been at home and there's been a lot of shouting in the morning, so I'm already overwhelmed once I've got into school. Again, what works one day isn't always the same the next day. We have to validate those experiences. We have to acknowledge what that person is feeling and how their nervous system is presenting to be able to support them.
Yeah.
Without that acknowledgement, you can't truly have that person believe that you are supporting them.
No, and that goes again back to that relationship building, that trust.
Yep.
Safe person, you know, I know they're going to actually believe what I'm telling them to be a truth. So I think it's really key.
I think what gets forgotten is that everybody's experience is different.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest kind of things that comes up when you're talking about validating experiences is, but they were lying. But were they lying? Your experience sat here, you're viewing a window out there, you'll see the people walking past there that I can't, but I can see the people walking past that window there. You know, when we came in from outside, you came in earlier this morning, it might have been colder outside for you than what it is for me when I've come in a couple of hours later. Everybody's experiences are different, even though the journey might be the same.
Yeah.
You might both walk into a room at the same time, but we don't give that credit to the children that we work with as much as what we expect as adults ourselves.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's a really valid point.
Valid point, yeah.
Not
we
to
validate that.
Put there.
The final part of Thrive is the environment again.
Okay.
and the environment is in WISE and in Thrive because it is so important and it has such an impact on how we support the children. So when we're looking at the environment in WISE, it's in a very much a reactive approach.
Okay.
Why has the environment caused the dysregulation in the child? What has gone on within the environment that has created this impact? When we're looking at the environment with the Thrive, we're looking at how we can proactively change the environment to be able to support the child.
Okay.
So if you know from getting to know the child, from validating their experiences, that actually when they're becoming overwhelmed, that's quite often when they say that things are loud. Right, okay, how can we support this child in the future? We know that this child feels things loudly. So if the classroom's getting loud, can we take this child out? You know, they're doing a bit of a science experiment, it's getting really rowdy. Can we just say to that child, are you okay in here? Or do you want to step out for a minute or two? Is it a child that is happy to wear ear defenders? Is it a child that is happy to have something in their ears? Again, validate the experience. Not every child, even though sounds bother them, are happy to wear big ear defenders or ones that go in the ear. They can cause sensory issues. So you've got to be innovative. Do they need to step out of the classroom for a few minutes? Is the playground, is the dining hall causing that issue? Look at all of the environments around and connect it with that experience of the child and be innovative. What can we adapt in the environment? And it goes back to those really small adjustments that we were talking about. I've changed children's schooling and the experience that they have by taking away the chair and putting a cushion on the floor. And they would prefer to kneel on the cushion and write. And they went from not managing to do quarter or half a page of writing, so they were writing 2 or 3 pages.
Wow.
You know, in year 6 in school, and achieving the SATs, which wasn't thought possible at the beginning, because we give them a cushion and we let them have flexible seating.
And that's such a small
chairs over there in the corner if you want it. If you decide you want it that day, we can move it. Your cushion's going to be there. I've put elastic bands around the bottom of children's chairs so that they can have something to consistently be pushing the feet against. And the difference that that makes to how much that child can manage to write and how their handwriting improves because their body is focused on doing stuff. We've had boxes of fidget toys and ear defenders at the front of the class with a kind of open box rule. If you want something to fidget with, off you go. You know, and it's about having the structure within the classrooms, overriding structures. You keep yourself and other people safe. You know, there's all this worry of, oh, we'll give them a fidget and they'll be like this, swinging it round and they'll hit somebody. If you've got structure and you're using that structure in a way that is overriding, we keep everybody safe. Billy, can you put the fidget down on the table? You're not being safe. You're not taking it off him. You're not giving him a sanction. You're reminding him to keep safe. Keep it within your personal space. Really simple changes. It's about changing the mindset of how we work as adults, and having this Be Wise and Thrive approach is a roadmap to be able to guide staff, to be able to do things in a more neuroaffirming way, which benefits not only neurodivergent children, but all of the children.
And I think I've always thought that, you know, putting non-neurodivergent things in place in schools, you know, affects neurodivergent people. But if you were to do it the other way around, I don't think it'd affect anybody.
And I think that's the difference
in the impact.
Is the way that the schools, a lot of the schools are working, is towards a very neurotypical, neuro-majority way of working. And what we're seeing is a bigger impact on those neurodivergent children. Children do well if they can. They will conform if they can. But if they can't, we need to be doing different.
Absolutely.
So if you put things in place for neurodivergent children, the children who can conform and who can sit at the table and can write without needing fidget toys and bands or flexible seating are still going to do that. You're not only opening up opportunities for these neurodivergent children to do things that help and support them, you're also opening up new pathways for the next generation of children to be more understanding than what a lot of us adults are going through at the moment. You know, we need to turn the tide on the way that us as adults work with these children. But actually, if we do that, the teachers that are now in primary school that are going to grow up and become these teachers are going to be doing this as a natural way of practicing.
it's going to come very natural to them, like you say, isn't it? So that's I think that's us done for now for today.
It's been fabulous to chat.
It's been really good to talk. I've really enjoyed it, and I think we need to do more of this. Talking about these things, getting the word out there, and obviously our book. And if you want to give it another plug, tell them where they can buy it.
So the book is called Your Safe Space, Creating a Home Where Autistic Children Thrive, and it's available on Amazon, or you can go onto my website, which is www.joegaunt.com. Thank you.
There we go. Thanks for listening.